Hey, friends. Good to see you guys. Am I coming through all right here? Calling in from home, so things are a little bit different. Want to make sure that it comes through.
Good. Clear.
Nice. Perfecto. Well, good to see you. Hi, Nathaniel. Good to see you, buddy. Brian, John, Claren, good to have you here. Let's jump.
And Lynn should be showing up shortly. He had a little longer trek
Okay, no
than
problem.
I did. So
No problemo. All right, well, let's do a little bit of check-in before what we'll do is we'll do some check-in. I want to just kind of paint the picture for where we'll head in the transition because we're getting ready to finish up EMD and that last segment. And then from there, we'll go into our strategic huddle with the priorities from our latest Phoenix team. So how about Nathaniel, give us an update, about a 1-minute update, buddy.
Yeah, the last time we met, I mentioned that I will have my huddle with the pastors, but that did not push through because some of the pastors, all of a sudden, they have some quote unquote emergency personal thing. So I hope that will happen this October 15th, and we have scheduled it for this October 15th to have my first huddle. But when I met them in Toronto last time, we have this, I call it the mini huddle in a restaurant, wherein they enjoyed it, and some of the associate pastors really, they're pushing me that they want to join in. But based on the instruction given by the president, my responsibility is only towards the lead pastors. So I will oblige with that.
Yeah, that's great. That's good to have people knocking on the door wanting to get in that way. Great, Nathaniel. What rhythm are you going to have for when you'll meet? Will you guys meet weekly or bi-weekly? What's the schedule?
Because of our schedule, it will be only once a month as of these first 3 months.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Thanks, Nathaniel. Brian, give us an update, buddy.
So another weekend away. Had actually a great weekend in Saskatchewan, a little town called McCoon, about 400 people. They had the 90th anniversary of a church there, which was awesome. So I had the opportunity to talk about building, and I talked about Jesus' encounter with his disciples, and who do you say that I am, and then the rock of building, and then the rock of stumbling that really comes out later in the. So I didn't bring in invitation and challenge. I just used the building metaphor more so in that, but it was huge. The church was packed in this little town, probably 120 to 130 plus people. Had lunch in their new hall, and there's times where I go to some churches and they just feel a little bit flat. This was filled with excitement, anticipation, and focused on what the Spirit's doing. So it was a marvelous experience, and got to share a little bit about way of Jesus. Came home to a snowstorm where I had a nice long snow spoiler on my car. It was about a foot off the end of the car. So it's starting to warm up again, but oh my goodness. And I'm just at the end of just going steady. And I feel like I'm kind of making it through these 2 weeks, and I'm going pretty steady. I get a day off on Saturday, but it's been push. So
yeah, thanks, Brian, for that update. It's been getting cold here in California as well, but I don't even know how to spell snow, so sorry. John, give us an update, buddy.
Well, I'm actually quite excited about the beginning and puck drop of my Toronto Maple Leaf hockey season and the road to the Stanley Cup parade. So I look forward to hockey is my replenishment and outlet, and sometimes stressor. So again, to me, this is a new season. I, like Brian, feel quite weary today. I had a good, productive meeting with a board last night that went on to 11:30, and I was 2 hours away when I was done that meeting. So I'm with you today. This is our season, and we are just committed to praying for each other and staying faithful to it. I've continued my 2 huddles. Yesterday, when I completed my huddle, at the end, one of the pastors says, "I've never been in a conversation like this before." So I don't know what I'm doing, Michael. I'm trying to copy you, but it was kind of interesting that it's not very revolutionary. But he said, we've never sort of gone this deep on something before, because I was pushing him through the circle as such, but he doesn't know the circle. So that's encouraging.
Absolutely.
I usually go for a walk after my huddles just to say thank you and to just get some air and some replenishment, because they are really good, but also quite ministry oriented.
Yeah.
So that'd be my comment as I'm learning.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Wow, that's so good to be able to hear and to get good feedback like that. Yeah, that might be even interesting. Maybe now's not the time, but to mine out more of like what it is that's impacting them the most. And I think again, yeah, it does just hit at the value of imitation in that way. Awesome. Claren, give us an update, buddy.
Sorry about that. It took me a little while to get the right button to unmute myself.
No worry.
So I'm traveling today, and my wife is driving, so I'm not driving hands-free. So just so you know. Since we last met, I took a road trip to the near north, spent 4 days on the road, and connected with a bunch of pastors, and that was great. Some good reports of baptisms, conversions, in a couple different places. So that was good to hear. Did a training on disciple making with 16 people from Simon's church. And then I spoke in John's church, not this John, but another John, on the Sunday on disciple making, and had some good conversations afterwards with that. So that was a profitable road trip. We'll see what all comes out of that. And then I teach this coming weekend early next week. So that's
Great. Thanks for the update. The last segment was a little bit broken up, but we got the majority of the update that you were given. Thanks, Claren. Lynn, welcome to the call, buddy. Hey, give us an update. You're the last one on the list for today.
Yeah, I just blew into town. I didn't want to be on the call like Claren driving, because I got hills and I lose connections regularly. So sorry I'm late. Still struggling with my Phoenix cold. It's a 3DM cold, and it just hangs on and won't let go. So we can tell Bob that. Yeah, it was been on the run. September was nuts. Back connecting with pastors again. I was down in Medicine Hat, which is a community about 3 hours away, doing a pastors network group, and I just did a Way of Jesus disciple making skill set with them down there. Had some great conversation, and I updated them on Way of Jesus, where we're going, how we're trying to put in some 3DM vehicles to our Way of Jesus platform. It was well received. This is a church that has the Way of Jesus banners hanging on both sides of their sanctuary, like 12-foot banners, just huge, running down either side with Way of Jesus. And so they're all in. They're actually focusing on church renewal, but they're using the language of the Way of Jesus to track their disciple making in their local church. So it was a good experience there. I just talked about how we're tracking with 3DM's disciple making huddles, Way of Jesus huddles, and they were quite intrigued and interested in the trajectory of where we're going. And Hillcrest Church was there, John, and they were quite interested in how Way of Jesus was going to blend in with 3DM, because they were in a 3DM huddle with Julie's husband, Dirks, Dirks.
Pat Dirks.
Pat Dirks, yeah. And so they're tracking Way of Jesus 3DM, and they're watching us to see what's going on. They just hired a new executive pastor, starts he'll start January the 1st, and his intent is, the pastor of this larger church, 1,200 people, says he's going to call you on January 2nd to find out what you're doing with Way of Jesus, because he said Hillcrest needs to align with the EMCC's trajectory and disciple making.
That's awesome.
I'm not sure where all that's going to go, but their lead pastor was excited about how I laid out the Jesus-shaped life, the Way of Jesus, and then said, our executive guy wants us to align with where our denomination is going.
Awesome.
So that was I thought it was pretty cool.
That's so good. Great stuff.
It's a win for that church. Hey, John?
Nice. All right, guys. So we're in transition in just a matter of weeks. So we've got this strategic huddle and then 2 more to go, which would put us at October 16. Do we have any conflict at all with Canadian Thanksgiving? I don't know. I think, what day do you guys celebrate Thanksgiving? I've celebrated in the last couple of years Canadian Thanksgiving, but I can't remember. I think it's on a Saturday, right?
The 14th, Monday the 14th.
Monday.
Yeah, it's on Sunday, Monday. It's always on a Monday.
Okay. So no interference then with that last. Okay, gotcha. So that'll take us to the 16th. We're finishing EMD, and then what we'll do is we're starting building a discipling culture. So that'll be the book that we'll work through next. And so is there anybody, just by show of hands, that doesn't have building a discipling culture? I'd imagine that all of you do, because it's just core content for the learning community. Go ahead, John.
Which version?
I
have 1 and 3.
That's good. We'll use 3. So if you don't have 3, that would be great to have. I have now led a huddle all the way through that 3rd edition. And so there are a couple of unique little changes that we'll make in there. If you absolutely couldn't make it happen financially or something like that, you could get by, but there's a couple of segments where it's out of order and there's different content in there. So, yep, version 3. That's a good point. I forgot about that. And then what I'd like to do is see about just taking maybe a couple of weeks off. So we would finish on the 16th and then take a short break and then launch again. So if I'm looking at my calendar correctly, if you don't mind trying to look at yours along with me, that would mean we would take the 23rd and the 30th off, and then we would jump back in on the 6th. Is there anybody that has any issue with that schedule and relaunch on the 6th?
Claren and I will be in Fort Wayne on the 6th.
Okay.
So we'll be right in the middle of that training. So I don't think we'll be available. I don't think.
Yeah. So good. That's kind of the type of information.
Next week, we're with Curvin, right?
On the 13th.
And the following week, we're with Curvin, all of us as RMs. So theoretically, we might be able to work it in if we tell him. And that's more doable.
Okay, good. So then let's look at that. So we'll technically take 3 weeks. We would skip the 23rd, the 30th, and the 6th, and then we would look to launch again on November the 13th. We'll run into a couple of holiday things where we'll need to kind of work our schedules together. I don't have all of my like Harvest Wealth Group stuff in here. I know I've got a couple of workshops and things that I need to go be at, but for a launch, I think November the 13th would be the right one. Any other input on that?
Yeah, I think just for that, we should confirm with Curvin, because he builds the agenda, even though we're trying to work with him to do that. And we do have some guests that we're inviting him in.
Yeah.
And so I don't know exactly what time of day those guests are coming. So just maybe I'll take that on to try and confirm that with Curvin.
Okay. I'm actually, I'm pulling up my other calendar to double check. Sorry, I didn't do this in advance. November 6, 7, 8. Yeah, you know what? I'm actually on the road. Let me see. I don't know where I'm going to be on the road that day. I think I'm
On the
coming back. So
13th?
yeah, on the 13th, I believe that I could probably work something out, even though I'm on the road, because I'm traveling home that day. So that should be able to work out for me. So why don't you, Brian, report back in, and if the 13th doesn't work, we could always then start on the 20th. I think it'll just be good just for a short break. Again, even as modeling huddles, you kind of need that. There's a point of like relief at hitting some milestones, and then it's good even with some downtime to be able to rest that way and then hit a fresh restart. The trouble is that you want to make sure that the restart, this is why I'm trying to make sure we can all hit the ground on the same day. If you don't have a good solid restart, then it can be really difficult to return back to the momentum that's already been happening in there. So, yep, Brian, give us a heads up on the 13th, and then we'll go from there. Any other input about building a discipling culture as the next book, or about our potential start time on the 13th or 20th? Let me write that.
Could we consider moving the call up a half an hour, or is that a problem?
What time would you, so move it to, it's 1 p.m. Pacific time for me. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I guess I was trying to go from 4 to 5 rather than 4:30 to 5:30. It tends to be a little challenge.
I would be just fine with that on my end.
But I'm realizing I'm mucking with you guys, so.
Yeah, we're across all different time zones there.
Understood.
I would be completely open to that. In fact, I'd be favorable for that change. Nathaniel, what would that work for you to start our call 30 minutes earlier?
That's okay with me.
Okay. Brian, what about on your end?
Yeah, we're talking about the regular rhythm, and I wouldn't have a problem.
Okay.
That would be 2 o'clock for me.
And I would suggest that we finish this portion EMD at our 1:30, and then when we launch again, we would start at a new time. John, if that's okay, I didn't mention that clearly before.
Based on how you're teaching us, I expect a nice email with all the schedule and everything.
You bet. Claren, what about you? Would moving the call to 30 minutes earlier once we relaunch be okay?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I can make.
Great. And Lynn, what about you?
Good to go.
Okay. Let me write this down. 20th. And we'll go 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time. Okay. Sounds good, guys. Well, here's where we're going to go for the remainder of our call. We've got Brian and Lynn, who I'm going to kind of hand the microphone over to, and they're going to lead us through the strategic priorities that they walked away with from Phoenix. We're doing this to kind of make sure that we get these two teams together as strategic priorities come along, even though you guys are in different locations. It'll give us a good chance to hear those priorities, ask the questions that we need, kind of get all of our minds wrapped around what that looks like, and kind of all that stuff that we do at strategic time. So I'll hand it over to one of you guys, however you want to roll that out.
So Lynn, how are we going to do this? Lynn and I just did a shared teaching with the executive pastors around Alberta to talk about Way of Jesus and 3DM. And it's always comical to watch us because we are so different. I'm the point person, task oriented. He's the relator, storyteller. So maybe I should go first, Lynn. And then you come back and you fix all my mistakes and fill in all my holes. That's usually what you do, right?
I agree. I can do that. That's not a problem for me, Brian. You start, and I'll fix. I'm gonna mute now.
Okay. Oh, that's kind of small. I'll just go to this bigger one here to inform us. So this is just the priority thing that we came up with. We, of course, did our SWOT analysis as well as the stop-start thing. And I recall the stop-start. The stop-start had more starts than stops, which didn't look too good. We might need some help there. But basically, from our priorities, we're looking at we came up with 4 second cycle huddle. So that what we're meaning by that is that we're probably starting some new huddles, and then those that we've huddled with will also be then starting like a second generation type huddling. Again, the second priority is the pastor network groups, way of Jesus ethos focus, and we've talked about this before. Then the third would be 3DM learning community in Canada, and so we're looking towards that in 2020, either May or fall. And then followed by the fourth one would be regional gathering, as well as General Assembly and the pastor development days, that our outcomes and our expectations would focus towards the way of Jesus. We don't know necessarily how to do that, but we can do that. By the way, I have this written down, and if you want me to, I can just send this in a quick chat. And that, oh, how do I do that from here? Oh,
Yeah,
anyway.
I don't think it'll show up in the chat bar if you're in this presentation mode. It'll bring us back to this spot right here.
Oh, I see. So anyway, I can just roll that out. Oops. Quickly here. It's just so my goodness. Sorry guys.
That's all right.
Do you need some help with your technology, Brian? I could help you.
This is the fixer coming in.
Oh, it might be too, so priorities for the next, it might be trying to do too much here. I see, okay. And so that's the reason why it wouldn't copy, is that it, you can only copy so much to do in the, into the thing. So anyway, so I'll go back to share, Brian, share. Okay. So anyway, that kind of defines things for us. So the paradigm shift for the first one is from info to imitation. A vehicle is huddles. The win would be a second generation, that we would see that really rolling out in a big way. People would be, again, the RMs are leading this, but also the present huddle participants would be the second generation. They'd have their own huddles. How far do you want me to go with this? Do you want me to go into the detail across, Michael? Is that?
I think if you went the first 3 columns, that would be
okay.
The best route. And then we could fill in if we need to with the other parts.
Sure. So the paradigm shift for the P&Gs would be from invitation, invitation, yeah, because we use these words. It's kind of a sharing time, so kind of an invitation focus time to an invitation challenge time as well, and that would focus on the P&Gs. And then the 3DM in Canada, again, from a 5-day or even overview focus to learning community coaching focus with the learning community. And then with the regional gathering, General Assembly, and pastor development days. So we're trying to move from low challenge to high challenge. And And again, so in our pastor network groups, which sometimes happens monthly or periodically, again, it's an invitation focus. But with the pastor development days or the regional gatherings, those are only annual events. And so they're quite low challenge. Sometimes, what shall I say, visioning, hype and stuff like that, to really bring up what's the challenge, what are we going to do, what are our takeaways that actually we're going to put feet to the ground with these things. So that's what we're focusing on. So Lynn, I don't know if you wanted to add something to what I said. Of course you do.
Hey, before you do that, let me just make sure to get clear. So on number 4, RG and GA, I know, can you just define what those
Yeah, again,
are?
sorry, it should be RG. So it's Regional Gathering is one of our events that happens every 2 years. General Assembly happens again every 2 years, but in place of a regional gathering, right? Yep. So we're meeting together as a larger family group annually, and then also annually we have what we call a pastor development day.
Great.
So that is a focus on pastoral leaders, usually some input from the president, as well as some updates of EMCC. That's how it's been going.
Great. And then...
That was a polite way of saying it.
Thank you.
On that one in particular, would you mind describing the win? Because I think the other ones I understand as I just read them, but measurable LTO outcome Kairos.
Yep. So again, we've had strategic planning demonstrated to us through the learning communities, as well. You've been taking us through some of these strategies. We, together as a family, don't do strategy, and maybe this isn't it, but that's what we were trying to get towards. What are we going to take away that we're going to learn, listen, trust, and obey with for the next year or whatever? So I think it might be a more limited scale, but if we start to add some strategy and some some very high important goals and strategy that they can focus on, I think we'll be getting more engagement and takeaways. Gotcha. I hope that makes sense. That was our effort anyway.
Awesome. Okay. And then I have one more question before Lynn jumps in. Then I notice on the people, so I can clearly see who that is. My question isn't about national team, but do you have the authority and responsibility to lead out these priorities? And national team's already kind of behind it. Is this something that still needs to be run through Curvin? Give me a little bit of context on that.
Yeah, so 1 and 2 are absolutely within our purview. 3 and 4, when we say national team, that includes Curvin. And of course, Curvin would be having input and signing off. I mean, if he's going to say no to it, I mean, that's the bottom line. But I guess our feeling is we're tracking the same way. This wouldn't even come, I don't think, as a major surprise to Curvin. So that's why we put national team in there.
Yeah. My guess is that he would be super thankful that now you're thinking about that vehicle and wanting to help shape that. And I'm sure he wants to be able to have his input in there and provide the insight and perspective that he brings to the table. But I think shaping that together could be great. And I could see where that could be either a huge challenge to try to get that shaped together and the tug of war that could happen. If he's used to leading that out and you guys are simply the recipients of it, that there's this new tug of war. Hey, we want to be players in this, and you've trained us with this kind of intended outcome in mind, and we want to be able to help shape all of that. And so I think that would be good stuff to work out, because I think if you can nail those number 3 and 4, the growth has just continued, and the change has continued to multiply and expand all the more. And it's beautiful to be able to see that. So
and one thing just historically to let you know, obviously Kervin's been in this role for 2+ years now. Before that, the regional ministers really had high commitment to direct, the regional gatherings, General Assembly, even the pastor development days. Kervin took that somewhat because the regional ministers were saying we can't do everything, and so he said, okay, I'll do it. But I think with this, we're looking at trying to not necessarily take it back, but just integrate some more stuff towards our big goals that we're working towards. Yeah.
That's great. That's even better that's the history of it.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. All right, Lynn, go for it, buddy. Color commentary and fix it all.
Brian, you did an excellent job. I don't know what else to say, but here's a few things. First is under our our paradigm shifts. As we were working through and talking through our paradigm shifts in our social space, we're finding that we're rounding the bases on some of this stuff. We're actually coming into like our sophomore year kind of thing. And there's this, now what do we do, that we've got the hit and here we go, rounding the bases. So that was actually encouraging, but it also got us to a place where, we're rounding this base. This is new territory, haven't been here before. What do we do? But it seemed as though, and even Kent mentioned, he really liked our conversations this time around in Phoenix, because he said it seemed as though we're getting more traction. And I'm not sure where he was coming from, but it seemed as though we were able to actually process and think through a little quicker on some of these things because we had traction. We have traction. We're moving forward. And now this is going a little quicker. So it's like the flywheel is starting to get some momentum. But it's almost like, okay, we've got momentum, but we don't want to stumble.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a feel of where it's at. Even when we go from under the PNGs, from invitation to invitation and challenge, we wouldn't have written that last year, kind of thing. So now, it's just in the paradigm shifts, we're ahead from where we were, but now it's like, now where do we go? And it's like every base we round, it's a new experience. So, but it's what I really appreciate about this is the vehicles are becoming more clear. We did not have clarity on the vehicles a year ago. And now it's like Way of Jesus huddles, pastor network groups, learning communities, regional gathering, general assembly, pastor development days. So we were able to just say, hey, here's some vehicles we can actually attach this to and move forward. Yeah. So that was actually pretty cool as we were putting this together. It's like, oh, we've got vehicles, we've got a process. Here's something we can move forward. And it's pretty clear what our next paradigm shift is. So it's kind of like some of the fog was clearing away. So there's just a bit of a feeling there.
I love it. No, I think I see that same exact thing too. I could see where somebody would say, hey, you guys seem like a different team. You're not discussing the same things or even arguing over the same things as before. Those things seem settled, and now you're taking new territory. I hadn't quite thought about it in that same way, because since I'm in it with you guys, I do remember kind of the Way of Jesus huddles and the pastor network groups, developing and becoming vehicles and being streamlined to operate in that way. What I noticed then is just the new vehicles that we've got: the regional gathering, the general assembly, and the pastor development days added in there, which almost sounds like now you're rounding out the whole fleet of vehicles and everything's pointing in one direction, if I'm assuming correctly at this point. So that would be something I would, high five about. Lynn, I think you said two things that you would bring up.
I always say that.
Usually he has three things, but
I can keep going if you want.
One other thing that I just like your reflection on, Michael, is obviously our so we had 4 of us in Phoenix. Lynn and I had a pastor with us that we've been walking with, that are part of our huddles. So there were only 4 of us, and there's this other team going to Fort Wayne. And so, we recognize that this is, what we're getting out of it. But I think in November, we do have, that's actually the time that you want to start off the second thing. The purpose of that meeting with the RMs is they're going to be coming back from Fort Wayne, and we're going to try and figure out if we can, flow this together. And there's part of me that doesn't necessarily want to influence the Fort Wayne guys with maybe what we've come up with. I don't know if that makes sense. It'd be nice to get some feedback.
I think it does to me, because then are these guys, feeling like in the back of their mind they're under obligation to walk in some of these same priorities? I would suggest don't do that. I think, one of them, 3DM LCs in Canada, feels like it's the ripe priority that both teams should probably have on the horizon. I would imagine number 1 and number 2 might be the same types of things, but would get worded differently, possibly. I would say don't feel under obligation to have the same ones there. And then I think as you pile them together in November, that you're putting like items together with like items and saying, this is the thing we're saying, and then potentially cutting something and saying this is for a future quarter or year. But let's hold on to this so that we can move into it later. So, okay.
Would it be interesting to throw up our start-stop?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because that's kind of where some of this stuff came out of. We were stopping a few things and starting a whole bunch, and it just didn't even.
Yeah.
It looked bad, but I mean.
So
can you read that? Those little, is that too small?
It's good for me.
This?
Well, we could just look. We can read the picture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brian, walk us through, and then let Lynn give his color commentary at the end.
So a couple things to stop. I think there's still a sense among us that we're doing above our capacity, in that we're trying to do too many things instead of getting focused and narrowing down. Plugging up and filling the calendar with lots and lots of stuff. The region, again, this is where it came out of the priorities. The regional gathering and assemblies were always focused, or we didn't feel we had outcomes. Now, we do have some asks out of our regional gathering, but they're more organizational asks. There's nothing wrong with that. But as to ministry focus and what God's asking us to do, sometimes we just don't have outcomes. So we don't want, we want to stop that. We want to have some outcomes in that. And then, of course, with the Pastor Network Group, we want to try and transition or stop the old language and culture that was there. Not an awful culture, but it was a culture that again, we probably didn't push towards some outcomes and movement. It was kind of share and prayer time. So we wanted to shift that. So I don't know if we want to just let Lynn do his color commentary and then go.
Yeah, before he does, let me ask a question. So in my mind, you guys have taken the Pastor Network Group and already retooled, reshaped them. But what I'm hearing you state is either that's not been a complete conversion, either because they're still in process being shifted and changed, or maybe not all of them have been, half of them have been and the other half haven't been touched. So could you speak to that for me?
Well, you hit it right on, Michael. That it's both and. Like, some are in the process and some we're just starting that. So you're exactly right. That's why.
Yeah, and So like out here in Western Canada, Brian and I lead all the pastor network groups. So we just basically said, we're going to stop what we were pushing before. And now it's just going to be Way of Jesus skill sets. It's just a new language, new culture. And I even was talking about that yesterday. That's what I was doing in Medicine Hat yesterday.
Great.
But I realized that some PNGs in Ontario, it's all over the place. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Lynn, anything else you'd add to the stop before we move to the start?
Nope. Well, yeah, sorry. Where this regional gathering and General Assembly without outcomes was not from Brian or I, but it came from Kent, came from one of our pastors. And I thought that was highly significant that he says, I go to General Assemblies, I go to regional gatherings when I can, and it's like I come away going, what did I go there for? Like, what do I go away with? What outcomes are there? And he's the guy that said, could we come out of RGs and GAs with an outcome towards disciple making? And it was just I thought it was a brilliant thought. And I'm thinking, yeah, we have so many agendas flowing through General Assembly and Regional Gathering. We're trying to accomplish so much. But what if we talked about disciple making, one angle of disciple making as an outcome for our gathered assemblies?
How many people attend those?
Between 120 and 350.
Well, see, so the regional gatherings happen in two ends of the country, one west, one east. And so usually you have about 150, say, in the west, and maybe 150 to 200 in the east. Don't know. Our General Assembly, when we all come together, usually we're about 200 to 250 when we try and get the whole country together. So there are two different types of meetings happening in kind of a bi-yearly or a biannual basis rotation.
Yep. Okay. Are these pastors only? Are lay members?
Yeah. So there's both. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. So we use a very similar structure. Biannual, we have regional gatherings, and we've gone between 2 years ago we did 5 of them across the states, and then we did one General Assembly gathering with everybody in on that year. And so this year we're going to 3 regionals and then 1 national gathering. So just to give you a heads up. And the reason why I'm asking numbers is I've been thinking similar things to what Kent brought up. Like, what is this vehicle? What can you really do here? And so I wonder if outcomes are possible, just because you have so many people, and then I was thinking on ours, we have probably 2,500 at the national gathering. And then the regional gatherings are, they vary so widely. They would be anywhere from 300 to 600 people at each of those. And so it's difficult in there. So I have a couple of thoughts, but I'd like to talk more about that. So,
yeah. By the way, I wanted to say hi from Dave and Ken in Alberta, who are part of the Church of God.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So we were talking today, and I sat beside both of them, and we were chatting a little bit about 3DM and stuff like that. So
Dave Van Roon and Ken Wiedrich. Yeah. So Ken is so he was at, where did you guys meet him?
Well, we have what we call an Alberta executive meeting twice a year that's filled with district superintendents of different denominations and regional ministers, directors, and we all meet there. We had about 18 there today from across Alberta.
Awesome. That's cool. Yep. Love those guys. Really appreciate them. All right. Brian, take us through the start portion then.
So the start list started to get long. And I think
exactly, John. Look at John.
John's going, what on earth are you doing? but some of this we've been talking about a little bit, like pastoral leadership to multiply leaders. So we've had a heavy emphasis on regional ministers to instigate and facilitate, but now we need to go to that second level of pastoral leadership. And even, John has stories about doing associate or assistant regional ministers. So things like that. A strategic financial capital for Way of Jesus disciple making. We really haven't talked about that. Even we have a little budget line, but I don't think we have strategically focused on what that's going to look like. Communicate Way of Jesus, disciple making stories. So that again is just a communication process, right? We've been doing this. We're in about a year and a half plus, and I think, at least for me and some of us, we focused on good stuff happening, but I don't know that we've been able to communicate that broadly. And so how does that happen? Again, start with a learning community with 3DM in Canada as a start. New huddle for every pastor, with every pastor in a huddle. That's a dream. But anyway, we put it down there. Again, back to regional gatherings and assembly with outcomes and expectations. So that just notes the stop and the start. And then the outcomes and expectations, accountability for pastor network group. So again, those two things we just added. We had the stop, and then so what are we going to do to start that up?
That's good.
Michael, can I make a comment along the way?
Go for it.
Whenever you want to invite us in.
Yeah, go for it.
I just am struck by what's not here, and I'm just curious.
Okay.
The last time we had Family on Mission,
yeah,
our own all personal convictions. So is that not here because we were thinking more organizational? It's fine. It's just that I noticed none of that is here, yet we probably all admit to that reality of working on it or not having traction there. So I'm just curious about how the guys landed with the 4 and where did that go?
Yeah, so Family on Mission absolutely is still there. It's still on our radar. For whatever reason, the conversation leaned into more structural stuff, but Family on Mission is still huge. But to me personally, it's like Family on Mission remains something that I'm doing a little bit, but I'm struggling with, and it's just like, how do I get to this next spot? And it's a bit of a frustration. I'm on the conscious incompetence, and personally, I'm stuck on conscious incompetence.
Yeah, and I would agree with that assessment. I think as we were talking with 4 people around the table, John, it's not that this wasn't, that we laid this aside and, we've got it all accomplished and not going to do anything anymore.
No.
And I'm trying to recall, the context of how we were doing Start and Stop. We were being introduced into a little bit of a new phase, and so I think we were trying to apply some of the learnings that we were getting in Phoenix towards our Start and Stop. But it's a good thing to point out, John. Thank you. I think that's important to state.
I'm curious too, what about content? Was Family on Mission an emphasis in the inputs?
I don't
really.
think, no.
We talked about gospel.
Family on Mission was last March. There was a strong emphasis in March.
Right.
This one was as an individual.
Yeah.
What is your gospel? As you're sharing the gospel, what are you saying? How are you communicating? So it was kind of like a ramp up and a build up for individual skill sets, so that when you're Family on Mission, you're better at it. So yeah, it just didn't. Yeah, it didn't hit the radar as far as the front talking.
And this is the first time that they've run this one. Okay, so this is part of their new rollout of doing the learning community, and this is the first time they've done this immersion.
Yeah. That's what I was wondering too, if that wasn't part of the situation, because last time you guys were all talking family on mission.
That's right.
And usually that's the case because content drives in that direction. So I was curious if either the absence was maybe like an intentional veering away from, or if it was content specific that way. So it sounds like it could be a slight mixture of both of them. Trying to look at the scope and sequence for the learning communities now. Do you guys have that memorized by chance? Be a disciple.
Train disciples and
called disciples, wasn't it? So just a second here. I have it here.
I'm on our website, but I can't see it listed.
I thought it was be disciple. I thought it was be disciples, make disciples. This one was train disciples.
Be disciples, call disciples, train disciples, multiply disciples. But this one was called, what was this one called?
This is your third immersion, so I'd imagine this was train.
I thought it was train disciples.
Yeah, pretty sure it's train, guys.
If my memory serves me correctly.
Okay.
It's train disciples right there.
Great.
I got one.
Yeah.
Man, look at those detailed notes too, Brian. My goodness, it's like a book in there.
Well, awesome. It's the way Brian processes stuff.
Totally get it, man.
I need to write it down. Yeah.
Handwritten that way. So I appreciate it all typed up like that.
Yeah.
And then what I would do is I would take all my notes like this and then build all that stuff out for whatever we're doing at the local level. Okay. Yep. We're in just the final 10 minutes. So I want to open it up to John and to Claren and to Nathaniel. Any questions that you have? And in fact, Brian, if you don't mind kind of being prepared either to put up that start stop or the strategic priorities if we need references to it. So somebody start us off. I'd love to open it up. I was trying to just get clarity on my end. Hopefully that was clarifying for you guys too. Anything you want to know more about or push back on?
Looks like you guys also, as you work through the vehicles, sort of as we reflected in June, reprioritizing the order of our vehicles. That filter through in what your strategic plan as well. Is that in your mind?
That broke up, Claren. I missed the question or the statement.
Yeah, I'm traveling here again. Just pull over a bit. Okay. Just the order of the vehicles, like the huddle and that we talked about that in our NAV meeting in June, our vehicles, and so that seems to be the priorities that you dealt with as well there. Is that why you picked those topics? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Remember we put the Way of Jesus huddles at the top.
Yeah.
And really our regional gathering and assemblies were at the bottom. So that's, that's almost how I can't remember how we exactly ordered them or what was all there, but 3 are there anyways. So that just seemed interesting to me that keep up as set of your priorities or goals.
Yeah, I don't know that we actually thought about that and planned it that way. It's just that as we were thinking about our priorities in this second cycle, second part, it was almost like because we had landed on Way of Jesus huddles as our priority, we could more easily just put that down rather quickly and then move on to the next step. I'm not sure if that's what you're saying there, but it's like it's almost like that's something that it probably fits. Yep, I would say.
Well, and it sounds like, you know, sometimes those things are even subconsciously influencing. So you guys had a meeting, you guys had clarified things. I remember one of you, Brian or Lynn, stating too that it was easy. These vehicles were, it was easier to kind of like work through this. And so that could be that all the conversations leading up to this helped give it some infrastructure already, even if it was just unconsciously working it out that way.
Well, and I'm just looking back at our March priority list, which we had 4. And to be honest with you, when we were doing ours, we didn't necessarily look back at the previous 6 months. And for instance, we were going to do a guidebook and, stuff like that. So some of those things haven't been complete, and we've added to our list again. So those are good. That's a good question, I think, Claren.
Yeah.
As you meet in Fort Wayne and as we meet together, maybe we need to do some adjustment on what we're thinking to focus on.
Yeah, and it's always interesting that content drives priorities.
Oh, big
So
time.
you're sitting in it and you're listening to this conversation, so that becomes the box that you're thinking in, and so you're moving forward in that box. And yeah, we didn't pull back and take the 12-month necessary or the previous priorities. So it'll be quite interesting, the content that drives Fort Wayne, the thinking around the table, the conversations, the people that are there, their backstories, all that drives the conversation.
Yeah.
And so there was 4 guys there, and there'll be quite a few more in Fort Wayne. So I would anticipate that there would be it'd be a different set of priorities and a different content up for thinking.
Yeah.
And how that moves things forward and breeds the thinking.
I would sort of I always frustrated with the word priority means nothing when you have too many priorities. So frankly, the huddling journey we're on, that we're being huddled and huddling others, still remains the priority. That's why, without too much difficulty, I can talk myself out of PNG, a lot of fussing. Like I don't rate that as high as the huddling we need to do, and maybe the 3DM conversation, which is also feeding that. So just as I reflect on this, and number 4, if it's in Kervin's hands, which he said it was, we can't control, we can only influence. So again, that's just my reflection that I don't have the same level of, I only have 1 PNG that's actually working. All the rest have since ended. I'm putting no focus there. So it's going to be different across the country. So I'm just reacting to the 1 and 3 as being priority if we're talking over the next 6 months.
Yep.
Is that what we're talking about with this? Again, Michael, is it a 6-month window? Because too many priorities in 6 months, we won't touch some.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a 6-month window that is coming out of a learning community and then moving into the next one.
That's why I would push harder on the 4, because I won't be touching PNG issues in Ontario. That's too large of a thing. I'm huddling. I'm good with that. And I think the 3DM piece is sort of our next thing we're really talking about. That'd be my processing. That's all. So I don't know how you feel about that. I'm just trying to understand how I react to it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very sad about your reaction. I just, you can see it pouring out of me, right, John? It's just...
Well, John, the PNGs that we have, they're working to the point that they are. It's just that I have chosen, and I think Brian has too, that the ones that are working, we're bringing in Way of Jesus ethos. So it's like, this is a no-brainer. And so it's not adding anything to our workload because we were always doing those anyway. They're always on the calendar. And so this is just a shifting of content towards Way of Jesus. So it actually, it's there as a priority because it's something that we can do and have done. But I think you're right. 1 and 3 are, primary
So to
in my mind.
evaluate this through stop and start, you'd have to put start underneath number 3. You'd have to put continue underneath number 1, and each of us would be different on PNG.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting to acknowledge the variety there, but which,
Yeah, for sure.
How about this, just to get a little bit even more content? I'm curious now about your SWOT analysis. Could you give us a brief overview of your SWOT analysis? Because usually that's the starting point, and you're giving this overview of, what you guys were facing leading into it that brought about those priorities.
Yeah. So, again, we felt we were doing breakthrough on huddles, pastors of peace. That's this section right here, if that shows up on the top right. So we have new huddles. We have pastors of peace. We have some congruence and spiritual parenting happening there. We felt our battle and our failure process was went from no progress on family on mission.
And nobody on the national team has tattoos.
Nobody on the national team has
that's
tattoos.
a problem for us.
It's the biggest problem we have.
Oh, man.
Yes. Obviously, we were a little
same
distracted.
could be said about hair.
And so then the strength, again, community, common disciple making language, we're making headway on there, right? But weakness on even the paradigm shift and an incongruence in a content strategy. So we were talking more on our huddles, and we're working towards that, Michael, about are we doing the same thing in our huddles? I think our huddle outline, what we're doing is the same, but sometimes the content isn't the same. And even the question arises, should that be the same for reproducibility? So I don't know if that helps. That was your question. That's kind of where we went with our SWOT.
I'm going to annotate, so if you'll keep it still for me so that the stuff will stay there. This usually up here, when it's in the, this is an opportunity in front of us, but weakness is there. Usually it's an internal weakness. So we lacked the capacity. Now, it's not always the case, but that's like another litmus test to be able to put over that and then ask, what is it? What's the internal lacked capacity for becoming family on mission? Opportunity was there, but there was a weakness inside of us. The paradigm shift, the incongruence, that would be a good one to look at. Whereas this one over here, it's a strength that we bring to the table, but there was an external threat that came against us that prevented us from being able to get there. So sometimes that's helpful to be able to mine out a little bit more. What is the external opposition coming up against us, and how do we then fortify that in order to bring that into an opportunity? And so this actually sometimes can be really good to mine out some of those outcomes that I think that you guys were getting at in here, because we want to grow to be people who have the internal capacity to be able to take this territory and who have the means to be able to stand against the threat coming against us. Sometimes this means you come against it by ignoring it, depending upon what kind of threat it is. Whereas, here a lot of times the internal stuff is going to come back to identity and authority stuff on the covenant and kingdom triangles. So that's just, I think, some more fodder. And the reason why I wanted to see what was here is, so it was good to see that, look at family on mission shows up twice on here, both in the failure quadrant and then in the internal weakness quadrant as well. That just makes sense. That I think you guys categorized it correctly there. And then by the time you layer John's point, hey, this is missing, again, input has to do with that teaching input and all that kind of stuff. So that helps me to understand a little bit more. How about anybody else? Any questions you want to bring to the table about this or any of the other stuff we've looked at so far today?
My question on the SWOT team, on the SWOT is this with regards to EMCC as a whole organization or as individuals, as RMs?
We were thinking on the EMCC, those that are involved in this journey with 3DM to do the discipling, who makes disciples, and Way of Jesus journey. That's what we were talking about.
Because just for the information, on my part, my personal part, on Family on Mission, I'm glad to report to you that I'm on the 3rd generation right now.
Nice.
Not
Nice.
only third,
Yeah.
second, but 3rd.
Yeah.
We need to learn from you, Nathaniel.
And
Not
that
from
means
me, from the team. The team.
that means you're a grandparent.
Yes. By
Yeah.
God's grace.
Yeah. It's good.
All right. Well, here's the goal out of all of what we're doing today. This is slightly different than our strategic huddles have been in the past because it's largely content driven. And I think now that, we're at this point, that makes a lot of sense. The main thing was for us to be able to hear from Lynn and Brian about the process that they went through in the learning community, to be able to see those priorities, the start-stop list, and the SWOT analysis. Again, I would suggest that the team that goes to Fort Wayne is under no compulsion to be able to have to, make theirs align with this at all or be influenced by that. I think the beauty is that what you'll do is you'll have these two come together. In fact, I think that Brian's statement of, we didn't look back at our previous priorities might be a good aha that you have to benefit from, to be able to say, hey, well, let's actually do kind of an analysis of that and see which ones need to remain there. That's what our team oftentimes did, is we would go in and we would say, hey, we need to take this to another level. So it's the same priority showing up in a new way, which is the way that the huddle worked out the second cycle. And others would be, hey, we're going to drop this off the list because now we've kind of took it as far as we wanted to, or this needs to stay on there because we really didn't take any ground that we had intended to do so. So just that's another way of thinking about that. So any other closing thoughts before we wrap up? Okay. We've got 2 more huddles to go in EMD. I'll send out a follow-up email. It'll give us our assignment for what we'll work through. And then Brian's going to get back to me about the 13th. Is that a possibility to get together that day, or will we restart on the 20th? And then Building a Discipling Culture 3rd edition is our next book. Okay. All right. Bless you guys. See ya.
Thanks.